Hello there, it's Eddie G with Eddie G's Music World, and we are beginning another show. It is September 17th, 2018, and we have a few things on the docket. First, I'm going to say hi to a couple of people that tune in pretty regularly and thank them for listening. I listen to them too. Creep O Freak, CreepoFFreek. He's on YouTube. He's got a channel, and he chimes in once in a while and calls another guy that's listens to my show too. Number one bad dude. His show is on the Gonzo Podcast Network. He's on Twitter too. His significant other is Caressed, so she's around too, and she helps Grigster out with his show too. So we are trying to elaborate a little bit on a few things in music that I looked into. Occasionally I get curious about certain artists for whatever reason, and I go look up stuff and I just kind of read about them, listen to their music. It's not necessarily show prep, but at the same time it turns out that there are occasions when the things I am interested in are good enough to be on the show. So I just start talking about it. So here's a few little bit of things that have caught my attention in the last few days in between the last show. I look at a guy like Barry Manilow. Now, a lot of people think, wow, this guy loves metal. He loves Purple. He loves Deep Purple. He loves to go to Black Sabbath concerts. You know, I've been to Slayer. How can Eddie G's from Eddie G's Music World be even slightly interested in a guy like Barry Manilow? He's so mellow, he's so old-fashioned, he's old, he's whatever. I mean, there's all kinds of things you could say. But the truth is the guy has contributed quite a bit to music. He's co-written or written some of his songs. I'd say about 30% of his hits, which is pretty good. And other people, of course, have written his songs, like Scott English did the original Brandy song, which was changed to Mandy. And of course, Barry picked that up, and that turned into a huge hit for him. And he had the background where he would do the saunas with Bette Midler, and get exposure that way, doing piano. So he had an interesting beginning. He did commercials for McDonald's and Safe, and what was it, an insurance company? Anyway, it's not that important. There's all kinds of State Farm. That's what it was. There's many documented examples of things that he did before he was famous. And the incredible thing about him is I looked into what he's up to lately, and I shocked. I mean, I said, wow, you'd think this guy would be like, well, first of all, he just came out as being gay, but I had spoken to a contributor to Howard Stern's show for many years, Mark Harris, about 10 years ago, and he swore that he was gay, and that and this Mark Harris said that he used to date Neil Sedaka, who apparently no longer does the gay thing because he got married with the kids, and he's an old man and doing very well. But you know, Mark Harris was right with his prediction about Barry Manilow. So whether or not he's right about the Neil Sedaka thing, I'm not going to say it's true for sure. I mean, I doubt that Neil's lawyers are listening, so I'll say allegedly dated Mark Harris and Neil Sedaka. And I remember Mark told me that in the front row at one of his concerts, he made eye contact with Barry, like in the 70s. But since they knew each other in the mid-60s, when they were not well known, like Barry wasn't well known, Barry averted his eyes and didn't really want to have anything to do with Mark Harris, because he obviously wanted to keep his sexuality a secret. And he figured by the time that now that he's already worth $100 and something million and is established, he doesn't really care. You know, he came out. So, but that was a long time ago. So he wanted to keep it a bit secret. I also want to tell you that I'm doing this broadcast during the Howard Stern show live, which is rare for me, because usually I want to hear the Howard Stern show. But when Howard spends an hour talking about Bobo and how Bobo made up his awards, I don't think I'm missing anything too exciting. So I figured I might as well get the show underway, even though the Howard Stern show is happening at the same time. I don't think I'm going to be really at a loss. But my point is with Barry is that he's 76 years old, 75. He's had a heart condition that he's rectified through surgery in the last 5 years. He's loaded. Why would you would think that the guy must love to perform? Now, I've seen a recent example of how his voice is, and like a lot of these guys, it's on the way out, but it's still hanging in to the point where he can still sing, but he can't sing as forcefully as he did, can't sing as clearly as he used to do, but he's still out there doing his thing. So I'm going to assume that the guy, he loves to work. Because, look, I'm a lazy guy. I'm 58. I could work. I have a little bit of money that I'm trying to cling to. And I stopped working. And he has a fortune, and he still works. And he's like not even 20 years older than me. He's 75. You'd think he would have hung it up. But I have to hand it to him. The guy's doing Vegas. The guy's running around Florida. I mean, wow. The guy just throws his energy into his life like an amazing amount. This is a message to all people out there that are lazy. I'm a little bit lazy. I'll admit it. I mean, I do this show, and I do it for myself. And if somebody falls onto it by accident or reads a tweet about it, or somebody else that I deal with sends people to my show to hear it, or maybe I get an interview once in a while, which I have to figure out, then maybe I'll escalate my efforts a bit to be a little bit more involved in promoting a career as it is. But for now, there's effort there. I'm doing my show, but I'm not 75, and I'm not running around singing and playing piano for people. So good for you, Barry Manilow. I remember in 2007, I had a friend that talked to me about maybe going to see Barry Manilow, and I don't know, the friend was hesitant. He says, well, people will think we're gay because we're two guys at a Barry Manilow concert. And I don't know, I could have gone by myself, but he backed out. I didn't go, and now it's 11 years later. I'm almost sure that I'd be very shocked. I mean, I check his website like other people every once in a while to see if Barry Manilow is coming to Montreal, and I think I pretty much missed the boat. I'm not in the mood to drive to Florida to see Barry Manilow for 90 minutes or whatever. It's a little far for me. And so I'll have to just appreciate his music. And this isn't just to talk about him as he is some kind of, brilliant A-lister currently. He's doing the oldies circuit. He's not going to have a hit. Neither is Madonna, probably. She's 60. I mean, all of these guys are getting to the point where they've passed their prime, but they still can do an amazing stuff with the oldie circuit. And Manilow is one of those guys. I mean, a guy like McCartney, his new album, I have to check the charts later. I don't know, Egypt Station, if it came out or not, whether that is still viable commercially to come out with a new album from Paul McCartney, who's, as of course, the biggest act of all time. But, other than the collaboration with Kanye West and Rihanna, I think it was 4 or 5 seconds away, which he was not a big part of. He did about 30, 40 seconds of the song, where he got, quote unquote, a hit out of it. So he broke his almost 30-year span of no-hit records. From 1988 was his last hit, and then 2015 he popped in with a top 10 hit, I think, with Rihanna and Kanye West. But that's Paul McCartney. But there's no way in a million years that you'll get another hit record out of Barry Manilow. As far as a single goes, maybe he'll come out with Standards and shock me by having an album in the top 10. But really, he's in a good place anyway in life. He's not going to be a big star anymore, but he'll always be able to make money on the circuit. Another artist that interests me. By the way, you listen to Eddie G's Music World. I really thank you for listening in. It's September 17th, 2018. For prosperity reasons, people will remember the date. I looked up, and for whatever reason, I looked up Mama Cass, and I looked up what she had been through and how her life was and how it went. And another woman, she was always looking for the limelight, always looking for the stardom. She kind of tried different things, folk music, a bit cabaret type of stuff. And as luck would have it, through people that knew other people, it's she ended up getting thought of as a singer for the Mamas and Papas, and she was not a big star. She was in an album, in a band that flopped. I forget it. Was it the Mugwumps? I believe that was the name. So she was like, I hate to say it, like almost every artist. They don't just come out of the gate at 16 years old and hit superstardom. There's only a few Britney Spears out there. So she managed to get herself heard in an audition by the record company with the Mamas and the Papas, and they didn't seem to mind the fact that she was very heavy. Of course, it was a negative for the viewers to see this beautiful, skinny Phillips girl. What's her name? Not John Phillips's wife that she was married to. Mackenzie, not Mackenzie. Doesn't really matter. So, it was a funny contrast where Phillips was the slim, skinny girl, and on the other side of the stage was this 300-pound woman. Well, Mama Cass still was a great singer. She had a great voice, and she fit in with the band despite the fact that it was visually not as pleasant to look at as a bunch of skinny, hot women. She was the one that was a little heavier, but she managed to succeed in the context of the Mamas and the Papas for a while. And of course, she tried dieting constantly. She was always trying to look better and be thinner, and all this pressure on her. And she never really could do it. But there came a time when the Mamas and Papas were splintering. Like, I don't believe she just up and quit. Maybe she did. She just kind of, in the midst of all this stress, like she had a crush on Denny Doherty. He's a Canadian. It was one of the two male singers of the band. The other one is John Phillips, and he never was interested to do anything with her. He wasn't into a really heavy woman, or just wasn't any sparks there. So there was a dysfunctional band, of course, but she was making a lot of money at that time. And at some point she left, and she managed to have about 3 or 4 hit records on her own. Dream a Little Dream of Me was one, and the 2 or 3 other ones. So she kind of got off to a decent start, where she managed to have some clout. And she did some Vegas shows where I think she was getting $40,000 a week to do 2, 3, 4 shows a week. So she was getting to a point where it was working out for her on a solo career. But even that started to dry up. And, these things don't last 10 years usually. She had a 1 or 2 year run of success, but then she started getting calls to be on variety shows like the Carol Burnett Show. And, they were making fun of her. Like there were jokes about her weight. And I saw a couple of these on this retrospective video I found. So she didn't really like being somebody that people made jokes about. And so, her career started to go downhill. And she actually had a child because she was into one-night stands, or maybe not into them, but she was involved in a lot of one-night stands wherein, guys would come in and out of the scene and, a roll in the hay, etc. And she doesn't know who the father was. Apparently they ordered Chinese food and had some wine. Then they had a daughter. I think her name was Naomi. Naomi? Don't know. And she's out there. I've seen her in an interview or whatever, but I don't know what she's doing. She's probably a singer too. But it turns out that Mama Cass, her death was actually part of some rumors that were never true. There was a half-eaten ham sandwich on the desk next to her. And so, of course, the gossip mongers said that she choked on a ham sandwich. And to this day, I think I mentioned Mama Cass to someone a couple of months ago, and they said, "Oh yeah, she choked in a ham sandwich," but no, it never really went down that way. It was always just, it was the heart. I mean, she abused her body by eating too much, and had a short life. How old could she have been? 30s, something like that, early to mid 30s. It's kind of sad that the daughter talked about things like, "Oh my God, I never knew who my father was because nobody knew." And the daughter says, "But I loved my mother and she loved me, but she was wild. She was running around, having a good time with her life, and I never really knew her that much for a long time, and so she had no parents by the time she was probably 8, 9 years old, which is a pretty sad demise." And anyway, the mamas and the papas, they didn't really have a lengthy career. They kind of just, it was kind of dysfunctional. I mean, I think they already slept with Phillips. Why can't I remember her first name? It's terrible. Mackenzie Phillips is the daughter of John Phillips and the other mother, Phillips, who swore and insisted that she was being violated by her father, John Phillips, which, you want to be a creep and run around, cheat on your wife. It's not like, it's not as bad as doing what you did, which is sleeping with your daughter. And I read his autobiography, and he was basically running around getting concocting illnesses to get fake prescriptions, to get all kinds of pills and medication that were used on the street and selling it to all kinds of famous people. So he was a bit of a creep, He was running around dealing drugs to the stars, pretty much. Like, we go from pharmacy to pharmacy, buy these pills because he faked the need for the pills, and sell them off to all these people, and he blew all his money. I mean, he was a big deal way back when he was younger. I mean, the mamas and the papas. He was in a band called the Highwaymen. Before that, had a wife, had a few kids. Then after that, he. Well, I hope I didn't lose connections. Let's see. Find it now. Well, it's still going on. The thing is with my computers, if you don't use it for 15 minutes, it goes dormant. But I see my show did not stop picking up my broadcast. Anyway, we went from the Highwaymen to the Mamas and the Papas, and he was married with kids, and then he met Phillips, the mother, and had some kids with her. And then Mackenzie Phillips, of course, went on to do One Day at a Time with Valerie Bertinelli, who, of course, went on to get married to Eddie Van Halen. And that's a famous rock star and TV actress combination that produced, I'm getting off on a tangent, but nobody cares, Alex Van Halen, not Alex Van Halen, that's the uncle. Wolfgang, who was the bass player is the bass player for Van Halen right now. And I did see them live with Wolfie there. I don't remember. I think it was pretty good, but it wasn't easy to tell how much background singing he was doing or not. So that's my deal on Mama Cass tragedy. And now we switch from the heavy woman tragedy to the skinny woman tragedy. So they were kind of almost the same era. This little mid to late 60s was Mamas and the Papas, and then the early 70s and very late 60s was the Carpenters. And of course, it's a similar thing where a dysfunctional kind of person, in the sense that she made herself sick for not eating enough instead of Mama Cass for eating too much. Carpenters were a band. It was like the Richard Carpenter trio at first, where he gathered up one other person, I forget his name, and his sister Karen, and she was kind of shy. She was not that keen on getting out in front, and they had a couple of songs that were, not well received. It was kind of a corny type of group, the Richard Carpenter Trio, I think it was called. And they did get a record deal. They moved from Connecticut to L.A. But then, it didn't go anywhere, that album, the first album. And then from there, they changed the name to the Spectrum. And that also was kind of a little bit, it wasn't really happening type of thing. Then it looked like from those two incarnations, there was a feeling that they maybe had to go in a different direction. So Richard said to his sister, let's just be the Carpenters and change it from the Spectrum and whatever. That turned out to be a really great move, even though the first single or two was just barely, like they did Ticket to Ride by the Beatles, which I thought was a pretty moody, good rendition of that song. I wonder if Paul liked it. Of course, Paul was being interviewed a lot lately, but I don't think anybody cares what he thinks of Carpenter's version of his song. So the Carpenters started a bit slow, but they started to move up. There was a Burt Bacharach song written, I think it was not We've Only Just Begun, Close to You. That was a massive hit. Richard was a very great arranger. He wrote a lot of the songs. He was behind the scenes quite a bit. He wasn't the star. But Karen didn't want to be the star either. She was just happy to be drumming and singing, but not like holding the microphone in front of the audience type of thing. But they evolved. They went into the bigger leagues. One great story I liked was how Richard Carpenter got his hands on We've Only Just Begun, which was a #1, I'm pretty sure. Richard, he was watching TV one day, and he saw on television there was a store, like a commercial for a bank, Coldwell Bank, I think it was. And in it, they played about 30 seconds of We've Only Just Begun, like words and the music, and Paul Williams was singing it, who co-wrote it with someone else. And Richard must have been already well connected in the music business, so he called Paul Williams. Maybe he knew him already. I'm not sure the details. But he called him and he says, that bank commercial, this is like right after the commercial ended. He didn't even wait till the next day. That bank commercial, is there more to it than that, or is it just like a little 30 seconds? He says, no, I have a lot of other words, but we had to cut it down for the commercial. She said, listen, can we get together? I think this would make a great song. And I can work on it with you and arrange it better and change things and add, stretch it out with you and take it from there. And imagine that actually went down that way. And amazingly, because of that call, Richard Carpenter was smart enough to see, he had the innovation to see that could be done. And of course, it was a massive hit too. And there were other songs and other changes in the band. And this band, from that point on, I think 1970, managed a good 11, 12 years of popularity. By the 11th, 12th year, of course, like all bands started to become less popular. Karen even recorded a disco album, which she did, and she asked the opinion of people at her label and her brother, what do you think of this album? And they were all kind of giving her like the polite rejection of what they, thinking it wasn't that good. So it got shelved. So they almost went that direction, but they decided that they advised her to get rid of it or just shelve it and not release it. So she did, and but then we get to the issues where Karen and Richard had their problems. Richard, to a lesser extent, he couldn't sleep. He started to use Quaaludes, and 1978, I used Quaaludes only one time. And my cousin had some, gave me one. I was in a pretty much of a daze back then. I mean, it was the only time, and I was like, I can see why you can get addicted to it. Because I never touched it again, and I don't know. I don't do drugs, but Richard was prescribed these things over and over for years, and he got hooked on them. He says, wow, there was a great high as a side effect of the taking of the pills. So he happily went on his way for years, 10 years, 8 years, I don't know. And he got hooked badly, and he had to get off them, go to rehab. And then they showed Karen in an interview, where's your brother? He says, oh, he has the flu, he's sick, so she covered it up. A good sister would do. So that was his problem that he went through. And of course, the most obvious one is the one that got the most publicity, negative, of course, was how Karen died from the anorexia nervosa. She had boyfriends, and then she got married to a guy for a couple of months, and that didn't work out. And so I don't know, maybe the whole pressure of the business, whatever it was, she reduced her food intake, and it's commonly known, it's not a new story, how she passed away. I think it was 1982. I remember being in university and hearing that story. It was kind of sad. I mean, I didn't know the Carpenters' music so well then. I became a fan later because she emotes so well with her kind of delivery of her vocals. You feel the sadness in her voice, which is what a lot of people said about her. Is the main thing that she was good at was doing her singing and conveying all the sadness maybe in her life through the songs. So the songs written for her were, I'd say 75% were like sad songs, or maybe not written for her, but sung by her. And then, of course, there was Top of the World, which is a little too cute for my taste, and Sing Out Song. I like songs more like Superstar, which is good, and We've Only Just Begun, and Only Yesterday, and I don't have the list in front of me, but I mean, I couldn't believe when I looked up the overall sales of the Carpenters, and I was astounded. 150 million records. God help them if they would have come out with their talents in 2018 with the illegal downloading. I mean, unless you're Taylor Swift, you're not going to make a lot of money. So they really did well, and they contributed quite a bit of excellent music over the years. I like their version of Calling Occupants, which was a Klaatu song. Klaatu was the band that everybody thought were the Beatles. They had a couple of minor hits, Knee Deep in Love and Calling Occupants, and I forget the Sub Rosa Subway. And the mystique about them was that they were the Beatles. They recorded under the name Klaatu because they didn't want people to know they were back together. But never really came to light as a true situation. Klaatu was studio musicians, and Beatles had nothing to do with it. I'm sure they got a good laugh out of it. This is a year before Lennon died, so people were thinking, yeah, maybe it's the Beatles. That whole thing went down. Oh, I would love to have asked Paul McCartney what he thought of that whole situation with the Beatles and the rumors that Klaatu was them and all that, but I'm not the interviewer. I don't think Paul would answer my questions unless I go down to the Bell Center and look for him. Montreal is doing a show on Thursday, which of course I'm still tempted to go to, but pretty sure I won't be shelling out that kind of money. Okay, so that's my three stories that I felt were worthy of discussion on AG's Music World on this September 17th, 2018, which was a retrospect of Barry Manilow, Mama Cass, and the Carpenters. Okay, we're heading to let's see how far we go with this countdown. I'm pretty sure my last number was number 21 on the Rolling Stones Top 500 countdown. And I remember ranting about Bruce that I hear the song Born to Run too much. Okay, we're going to number 20. Did I do this one? No, I don't know. The Beatles with Let It Be, speaking of McCartney. Probably a song mostly written by Paul. Of course, John Lennon's name's on there. Number 1. It was recorded, probably there was some studio help, but they did this one on the roof, I think. I'm mixing it up with Hey Jude, I don't know. But It's one of those songs, despite the fact that it's played too much, you still get a chill when you hear it because it sounds so heartfelt. I think it was about his mother. Uh, she had told him let it be, and gave him advice whenever there were problems that he had, and he turned that into that song. But John Lennon didn't like the song. He thought, it wasn't something that he was thrilled to record, but they put a lot of work into it, and I know that Billy Preston was part of it, and he did the organ on it. Not sure what Lennon did, but he must have done something. Harrison added the guitar solo, and this is late in the Beatles' career, of course, 1969. So, this is towards the end of the time, and it was a great song overall. Okay, let's see what's next. We're getting close. I did take a slightly sneak peek look, like I was flipping through the song, so I saw another Beatles song coming up soon. Oh, here we go. Elvis Presley, Hound Dog. I sure hope I didn't do this one on my last show. I don't remember. Lieber and Stoller written. #1 hit. And another signature song from him back in the day where he was very, very big on producing hits and very successful at it. Big Mama Thornton did her version first. And then Presley, of course, was known for this kind of style, a lot of like hillbilly style R&B crossovers. And it was part of a stage show in 1956. You heard some act called Freddie Bell and the Bellboys sing it in Las Vegas. And he did the song live in Milton Berle. Or did he lip sync? Anyway, probably did it live. And this was just part of all the big hits that he had in those years. And one of many, many, many songs that he had from then on, and a few before it too. It was the flip side of "Don't Be Cruel," which was Elvis's third single. Anyway, that's one of the big songs. Let's see. That's number 19, Elvis Presley with "Hound Dog." Number 18, could it be another Beatles song? No. A guy who inspired the Beatles. Number 18. Wow, that's pretty great respect for Chuck. Written by Chuck Berry. I mean, that's what sets him apart from a lot of these soul singers. He wrote the song himself. And this got to number 5, 1955. Of course, we lost Chuck Berry about a year ago or so. He quite innovative with his guitar style. It's not a long song, but the Beatles call him an influence. Probably Elvis did too. And in 1955, that's when he'd already been around for about 6-7 years, but that's when he was starting to become catching on with the public. And it was part of the Chess label. Leonard Chess ran that. And it was inspired by a Maybelline mascara box that was on the floor in the studio. So he saw that and it helped him write the song. Alan Freed didn't write Maybelline, but he played it a lot. He got some co-credit on, and got royalties for a while. But, a lot of criminality back then where, people paid the DJs to play the record and there were deals made a little bit back and forth. So I don't know, this Alan Freed was involved in a few corrupt deals. And sometimes, you get your name on a song that you didn't even do anything with, but because you're influential and you're playing it, maybe a little envelope comes your way, and then, if you are good enough to be able to pull that off, then, more money for you. But he got found out many, many years later that he was doing stuff like that. And a band that I saw, London Calling by The Clash. written by Mick Jones and Joe Strummer. Did see them in 1980. That's very high for the Clash, number 15 out of 500 songs. But it was a great song, so I guess they held it in quite high esteem to put it up that high. That was their third album that this was on, and punk was pretty big back then. A lot of politics, and they were not making money back then because a lot of the punkish songs didn't sell amazingly well. I mean, they had a big crowd when I saw them, but I don't know how much money they got out of it. But you know, they managed doing. These were not hit records because they were very. That song was never a hit in the U.S. Whether it was a single or not, I don't know. But realistically, it was didn't make them a fortune of money. The album probably did pretty well. And, of course, they had a few top 40 hits later, like Rock the Casbah and Should I Stay or Should I Go and different ones on that. But these first 2-3 albums they had were critically praised, but not commercially huge. But later on, like I said, they made up for it. Whether or not the surviving members have money or not, no clue. They were talented guys. They did a lot of work. Big Audio Dynamite came from Mick Jones. And Joe Strummer, unfortunately, we lost him about 13 or 14 years ago. Number 14, shall I take a guess? Who haven't we seen? It could be the Beatles. It could be... I doubt if they would pick Lennon on his own for some reason. And Dylan, does he have any unbelievably amazing songs that would get to the top 14 of all time? No, I don't think there's any more of him. I'm trying to see. Maybe it's the Rolling Stones. Let's just check. Bob Dylan, you see? There I go. Saying there's not one more song that they'll put up there that high, but of course there is. Blowing in the Wind, okay. Of course he wrote it. Wow, April 1962, he came up with this one. When he was hanging around Greenwich Village. Only 20 years old. You know, many people have covered it. He's probably made up millions just off this one song. And it was released in 1963. It was on the album Freewheeling Bob Dylan. That was considered a landmark song. And the first to record it was a Chad Mitchell trio. Then, of course, Peter, Paul, and Mary turned it into a massive song in 1963. And later on, this created a juggernaut of songwriting and, of course, singing. People kind of got over the fact that he really didn't have a great voice, but there were times where Lay Lady Lay and Hurricane were pretty good vocals. So I mean, you got over the fact that he wasn't a great singer, and his singing was not too bad, and you kind of learned to appreciate it anyway. And he apparently wrote this in 10 minutes time. He took the words, used a spiritual song melody type of thing, and it's like a folkish classic, no question about it. Getting to the close, I should have guessed who it was, but of course it was Yesterday, number 13. Well, we're really getting close to the end here. Of course, Lennon and McCartney, but there goes the example of McCartney's. I'm sure he wrote the whole thing by himself. He sang it by himself. There were some session musicians adding strings, but he laid down the vocals and the guitar by himself. And, you know, that's the kind of thing that makes me wish I could go to a show. I still can. I doubt if I'll go with anyone. There's one friend is going with his son, I think, and he's got his tickets. And another friend, he's on the fence. Doesn't sound like he's going to be coughing up $500, $600, $700. So, yes, like I said, no other Beatles were on the record. The arrangement was added. The string arrangement was added by George Martin. The string quartet, and drums could have been added. Electric guitars didn't fit, so they just never threw them on the recording. He says it came to him in a dream, this melody that he loved and put in the song, and he played it for Martin. He first called it Scrambled Eggs. Weird. In Paris in 1964 when he came up with that, but it took him a while before he recorded it, and I don't know, then eventually he changed, obviously, the name to Yesterday, which worked out to be a very good move, because Scrambled Eggs would not have made a good title for a song, and there was nothing relevant about that title, since he's reminiscing about a life that he had before. Sam Cooke, wow, I didn't think this guy was such a huge Sam Cooke fan, but looks like he is. A change is going to come. Funny thing is, you'd think I would know a song that got this high in the chart. I don't think I do. Probably heard the song by other people and maybe by him. But, you know, he was an amazing soul singer. Also had a tough life with being shot by some prostitutes or something. I think Blowing the Wind might have inspired him to write this. You know, he was impressed, so he came up with his own song, which was soulful and folky at the same time. Apparently, I've got to go back and listen to this. This came out in 1964, so his career was not much, didn't last a lot longer, because he died probably in the mid-60s. They were arrested once in Shreveport, Louisiana, for disturbing the peace. But all it was that they registered at a hotel for white people. So this part of this was in the lyrics that made him write about that. And he had also lost a son named Vincent that drowned, and that inspired the line, "There have been times that I thought I couldn't last for long." So, you know, you look back, and I didn't know that about Sam Cooke, that he lost a child, but I learn new things all the time. Actually, soon after was the death, where he was killed in a motel. 2 weeks later, after the song was released. So that's, you know, sad ending to his life. Well, most lives are pretty sad when they end, right? Number 11. Wow, The Who. That's impressive that they got to this point on the guy's chart. Pete Townsend wrote it. Well, he wrote just about everything. When Roger Daltrey was asked once about the songwriting, he says, "Look, let's face it. I can write songs, I've written songs, but there's only one songwriter in this band. And we all know that it's Pete Townsend." So this is an anthem, you know, a rebellious song. It was something that, you know, he says, "I hope I die before I get old," but let's face it, you didn't. You're still alive. You're probably 70. You're not dead. And I guess if they come back to Montreal and I see them again, I'll be glad that he didn't die. Of course, poor Pete, well, not poor necessarily, around 18 years ago or so, he was looking at some kiddie porn or pictures of kids naked or whatever it was. And they busted down his door once they found out about the British police. And his defense was, "Well, I was doing some research for a song or a book or a story. So I want to learn about these abused boys. So I went on the internet and I created an account to see the pictures," or whatever. He was looking at stuff. So I'm pretty sure, I don't remember the exact details, but he got reprimanded. Maybe he had to do a little community service, or maybe he had to defend himself. Didn't do time. Kind of got away. They call it the Important Persons Act. Kind of got got away with it. Whether or not Pete Townsend was up to no good, like viewing it for salacious reasons, or just doing the research like he said, nobody will really know. He knows, but they won't really know. Either way, that's just a story, a salacious story that came out and came to mind. And for this song, Daltrey really did an amazing vocal, with his stuttering and howling in the song, and great background vocals as well. Phenomenal drums for Keith Moon, who always performed. I found out a few weeks ago that there was a drummer before Keith Moon. I forget his name, but he didn't really. It lasted a year or two. This is when they were the High Numbers, or even another band name before that. And this guy, he's one of these best stories. He was there, and either did he quit, this guy? Yeah, I think he just said, it's not for me. I mean, you never know when you're in your 18 or 19 drumming that you're going to be leaving a group that turns out to be a mega group like The Who. So he didn't know. But he did leave, and I don't know, I think he didn't, in the interview, it didn't sound like he was regretting his decision. Maybe he just figured he did other things, and maybe he was happy, even though he did walk out of the Who. So this was their pretty much first hit. I don't think it was huge in the United States. It was more big in Europe. I Can See for Miles was their first really big song, which came out around that time. It was one of these things, they did it in 2 takes in October of 1965. So we're almost 53 years later. And listen, they're famous for smashing their instruments. The best, funniest clip I ever saw, if you ever have time, go on YouTube and look for The Who on the Smothers Brothers, where they planted explosions in the drums, and they didn't go off well, and they blew up too much, and they made too much of a mess. And I think it affected hearing of some of the members. Maybe it was affected the hearing of Townsend, because he has hearing problems. Over the years, that was one of the things, the explosion, which affected his hearing. And as well, for sure, all the guitars that he's been playing on stage, and being in front of speakers for like 50-something years playing music has taken its toll, and Pete Townsend's hearing has been affected. Okay, we're closing into the top 10. I think I'm going to probably try to leave it so that next week there'll be a number 1 song, which I won't reveal yet for those people listening and caring. Because if I talk enough about all the little stories about all the bands that I know, there'll probably be a few songs left to do for the top 500. Okay, let's see, number 10. We haven't seen a lot of Led Zeppelin on here. I don't know, maybe they're too commercially successful for this guy who's making the list. But we did Stairway to Heaven already. I mean, is there another Zeppelin song that a guy could have had, or is it like one of these James Brown songs? I don't know. I'm trying to think of what it could be. Let's guess at Aretha Franklin. I don't know. Ray Charles. Oh, should have stuck with that. That was a thought, that maybe one of these soulful guys. I was close with Aretha, but it was the same record label, Atlantic, and this is Ray Charles, What I Say. So this is Eddie G's Music World. We're counting down the top 500 songs currently on the Rolling Stones list. And What I Say, I remember being pretty much a collaborative effort, a lot of background singers, the Ray Letts singing, a lot of hey, ho. It was number 6. It was a happy song in the rock and roll world. People say, the rumors that it could have been some kind of sexually related sound effects with the ums and the ahs, but I don't know. It doesn't really matter. But yeah, I this was out before I was even born, but it got a lot of radio play, so I do know it super well. He's called a genius, Ray Charles. He had this massive career. He even had a collaborative hit with Billy Joel called Baby Grand. And he had always a great band with him, great female singers, like I said, mostly called the Raylettes, or they might have changed their name at some point to a different name, but they sang with him for many years. So he did it live, and of course people were thrilled with what they heard, and became a big hit record. Could have it definitely led to a long career for Ray Charles. It was 6.5 minutes long originally, but the label, the engineer on the record, was smart enough to drop it down to a few minutes, and it was like a gospel type of sing-along song. Definitely up there. Definitely deserves a lot of credit, a lot of praise. And look, he had a great career. And okay, he got to number 10. Can I guess what number 9 is? I'm gonna see if I can. Could be an Elton John song. Nah, I don't think he would. This list doesn't sound like they would go for such a commercially viable top 40 kind of guy like an Elton John or Billy Joel or Rod Stewart. Probably more, since this Ray Charles was black, let's think of another black act that he would raise to the level of being in the top 10. Would he do it with the Four Tops, Supremes? No way. Wouldn't do that. Temptations? Papa was a Rolling Stone? Let me guess. Pure guess. I only looked for 1 second. I don't remember. Nirvana, Smells Like Teen Spirit. Totally flips the whole thing. He goes to the 90s and gives Nirvana a top 10, a song in the top 10. Okay, we all know the song. I don't know if there's much I can add to this. Smells Like Teen Spirit. It was some kind of deodorant ad or something that they saw something on TV. Butch Vig was in the band Garbage later on. He was their producer for this album and maybe others. And let me see if there's any really exciting things I can add to it. I mean, little story. I do remember hearing the year after he died, Kurt Cobain, somebody was in their apartment and blasting Nirvana to like the volume was at the maximum and singing along with the guy, sounded like he was crying. Sorry, dude, but guy dies. You don't have to cry. There's going to be more things in life that are going to get you down than Kurt Cobain dying. You have your own life to worry about. Personally, I would never cry. Well, I did for John Lennon for about 5 seconds, but I don't go around. I don't sit around moping that the guy died. It's not a big deal. But of course, this was on Nirvana's album Nevermind. Almost got to number 1. I know for a fact he came to a small club in Montreal called Le Fufun Electric in the early 90s, like 91, maybe 90, because it was just before this was big, and played for like 50 people. I wish I was there. I never did see Nirvana. Maybe they came when I just wasn't in the mood to run to see concerts. I don't remember. They were here at least once, probably twice. Anyway, this really was a big movement. I mean, it was part of this whole Soundgarden, Pearl Jam scene of Seattle movement, and everybody flipped out over all these guys. I know the lead singer from Warrant once went for a record a meeting with his record company, like 91 or 90. He was looking for, was discussing with the label what their next record would be, because they had just come off some massive album. It was Jenny Lane, the singer, who died. And he says when he walked into the record company, he saw these massive posters for all these grunge bands all over the place, like Nirvana and Soundgarden and Pearl Jam. They must have been on that label, or at least some of those guys were on that label. And he said he knew that his type of music was about to go the way of the dodo bird, which it did, and ruined A lot of hair bands died a slow, miserable death, where they had to do the oldies circuit after 5 years, or 3, 4 years, because grunge had wiped out all these metal type of groups, hair metal guys. Anyway, back to the song. There were styles that were leaning towards John Lennon. He loved John Lennon, Kurt Cobain, and he had all that rage and alienation that Lennon seemed to have. And this was a landmark song. Again, it's another one of these songs. Liked it a lot when I heard it the first 500 times, then the last 500 or 1,000 times. It's okay. Don't need to hear it all the time. It's enough. Then, of course, he had passed away, as we discussed earlier on in the discussion of the song "Smells Like Teen Spirit." Since I was so wrong with my guess, I was thinking back to the old 50s, 60s with a soul singer. Then they moved me to the 90s with a grunge song from Nirvana. Let's try to figure out, should we just assume that he's going to go to the Beatles? Yeah, why not? I don't know if there's been a Hey Jude arrival yet. Let's see. Let's say Hey Jude and the Beatles. Maybe they already did it. The Beatles' Hey Jude, I swear to God, I was just guessing. I did not see this, and I was absolutely right. So out of all my 15 or 20 predictions, I pulled one of them off. Hey Jude, the Beatles. Okay, we get it. Biggest single in the U.S., 9 weeks at #1. Let's see if I can discern who actually put the work in, and then the other one got the credit, or did they work together? Now, produced by Martin, of course. A bit too long. He didn't like that it was too long. He didn't think it would be played because it was too long. And, it turned out that McCartney and Lennon won that battle. They got it, even though it was long, it became one of their classics. And Paul McCartney, I can guarantee you in 3 days, will be singing this song, because there's no way the fans will allow him to leave without. He usually ends the song, ends these shows with Hey Jude, I believe, or Let It Be, but it's probably Hey Jude. And it was about when he visited Lennon's. Paul wrote Hey Jude in 1968. He was singing it on his way to visit Lennon's soon-to-be ex-wife Cynthia and their son Julian. The opening lines where McCartney said, it's like a message for him. Come on, man, your parents got divorced. I know you're not happy, but it'll be okay. This is what inspired him. So he changed it from Jules to Jude. And that was connected to some musical called Oklahoma. And basically he came to it with a demo, meaning not the finished product that you heard. He gave it to Lennon, and Lennon approved of it. And Lennon kind of thought McCartney was singing it to him about his relationship with Yoko. And, there was a bit of stress between the two, Lennon and McCartney in those days. But either way, he liked the song, McCartney's lyrics, and it was kind of accepted by, they threw in the orchestra. And of course, it became one of the most overplayed songs of all time. But look, it's okay. Like I said before, they're overplayed because they're great. So that is coming to the end. We pull an hour off with not a script, only little words that say names of songs and bands, and I pulled an hour out of that. We'll still have 7 more songs to go next week. Eddie G's Music World, Top 500. Maybe I'll have 3 more retrospects of bands. So to anyone listening, or even if you're not listening, and you find this somehow, I want to thank you for being a part of the show. Eddie G's Music World for September 17th, 2018. Signing off. I appreciate it again, and I will be back. And we will have more fun, more games, and anything goes on Eddie G's Music World. Thank you.